The courtroom buzzed with skepticism, a heavy silence pressing down on Emma Rivers as she sat on the witness stand, her small hands clutching the hem of her worn dress. At just 15, her voice had shattered minutes ago under the relentless weight of disbelief, her lawyer's furrowed brow, the judge's stern gaze, even her foster parents' cold dismissal. No one believed her. They accused her of spinning tales about David Collins, a man they called a stranger. To her, he was her father, a truth buried deep in her heart. Judge Callahan, his silver hair glinting under the harsh lights, leaned forward, his voice like steel. "Miss Rivers, lying under oath is a serious offense. This man claims no relation to you, and there's no paperwork to support your story." Her eyes darted to the defendant's table, where David sat, his faded gray jacket hanging loosely on his frame, his calloused hands fidgeting. His face, etched with guilt, sadness, and a flicker of something achingly familiar, avoided hers. Her foster mother crossed her arms, a scoff escaping her lips, dripping with disdain. "She just wants attention. She's always been dramatic." Emma's chest tightened, tears stinging her eyes, but her lawyer's gentle hand on her shoulder offered a fleeting comfort. "If you have anything to show the court, now's the time," he whispered, his voice soft yet urgent. Emma's trembling fingers brushed the tarnished silver chain around her neck, a relic she hadn't removed in 10 years, its bent links a lifeline to her past. With a shaky breath, she unfastened it and stood, her legs weak but determined. "My mom gave this to me before she died," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "She told me my real father gave it to her the day I was born. She said if I ever found him, he'd recognize it." The judge's eyebrow arched skeptically. "Bring it here." Heart pounding, Emma walked past the glares and whispers, her steps heavy with years of doubt, and placed the necklace in Judge Callahan's palm. Her hands shook as she added, "Look at the back." He turned it over, his stern expression faltering as he traced the faint engraving, "To E.R., you'll always be my brightest light, D.C." The room fell into a stunned hush. David's head snapped up, his breath catching audibly, eyes wide with recognition and pain. "Where did you get that?" he rasped, his voice breaking. Emma turned to him, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You gave it to Mom. You told her to give it to me when I was ready. I was 4 when she died. I kept it. I remembered your name. I looked for you." David rose slowly, his movements unsteady, as if the weight of the moment might topple him. "My wife, she told me she had to disappear. Said it was for Emma's safety. I didn't know where they went. I looked. For years, I thought they'd both died." A gasp escaped her foster mother, her smugness crumbling. The judge's pen hovered midair, his stern facade softening. Emma pressed on, her voice gaining strength. "They said I was lying, that I was making it up, but I knew it was you. I remember you singing me a song about stars. I remember the way you tied your boots, double knots and loops. I never forgot." David wiped his eyes, a sob catching in his throat. "I still sing that song every night." The courtroom held its breath as Judge Callahan cleared his throat, his tone gentler now. "Mr. Collins, we will order expedited paternity testing, but from the looks of it, we may owe this young lady an apology." Emma faced the room, her voice steady with newfound resolve. "All I ever wanted was to find the truth. I wasn't lying. I just wanted my dad." 3 weeks later, the DNA results arrived, a perfect match. David was granted custody, the foster system issued a rare public apology for their negligence, and the court's records were updated, not just with a new family, but with a humbling reminder that a child's memory can hold truths adults overlook. On their first night together in a modest one-bedroom apartment, David stood at the stove, the scent of burning grilled cheese filling the air. Emma laughed, a bright, healing sound, as she recalled her mom's similar mishaps. He pulled out a battered guitar, its strings worn but warm, and strummed the Song of the Stars. She hummed along, her voice soft but sure, tears of joy mixing with the melody. "You believed in me," she whispered, her heart swelling. David's eyes glistened as he set the guitar down, pulling her into a tender hug. "I never stopped," he murmured, his voice thick with love and relief. "I don't know. Maybe they had a key." David raised an eyebrow. "A key? Do you know how many people have access to your car keys?" "Just me and my husband," she replied. David paused, letting the answer settle. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. No further questions." As she stepped down, David turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to call my first witness, Mr. James Thompson, Mrs. Thompson's husband." Grayson leapt up. "Objection, Your Honor. This is highly irregular. The defense didn't disclose this witness." David responded calmly, "Your Honor, Mr. Thompson's testimony is crucial to understanding the full context of this case. The prosecution has had ample opportunity to investigate." The judge considered for a moment, then nodded. "Overruled. Call your witness." Mr. Thompson, a tall man with a nervous tick in his jaw, took the stand, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his jacket. David began gently but firmly. "Mr. Thompson, do you own a black sedan?" "Yes," he replied. "And do you have access to the keys?" "Yes." David nodded. "On the night in question, did you lend your car to anyone?" Mr. Thompson hesitated, glancing at his wife. I lent it to my nephew Alex. He needed it for a date." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, Mrs. Thompson's face paling in shock. David pressed on. "So your car wasn't stolen, you lent it to your nephew. Is that correct?" Mr. Thompson nodded. "Yes." David turned to the jury. "So the car wasn't stolen, it was borrowed, and yet the prosecution is trying to convict me for grand theft auto based on a false premise." Grayson stood, flustered. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The defendant was still found in the car without permission." David countered swiftly, "Your Honor, if the car wasn't stolen, the entire charge of grand theft auto is baseless. The prosecution's case is built on a lie." The judge leaned back, clearly intrigued. "Continue, Mr. Miller." David turned back to Mr. Thompson. "One last question, did you inform the police that you had lent the car to your nephew?" Mr. Thompson shook his head. "No, I didn't think it was important." David nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. No further questions." As Mr. Thompson stepped down, the courtroom buzzed with uproar, the prosecution's case beginning to unravel. Grayson, now visibly flustered, called his next witness, Detective Harris, the lead investigator. Harris, a seasoned detective with a calm demeanor and graying temples, took the stand. "Your Honor," he began, "we have video footage from a nearby security camera showing the defendant entering the vehicle on the night in question. This footage clearly places him at the scene." David's heart raced, he'd anticipated this. The video was the prosecution's strongest card, but he'd spent hours analyzing it, frame by frame. When it was his turn, he stood, confidence growing. "Detective Harris," he began, "you mentioned the video footage shows me entering the vehicle. Can you describe what exactly is visible?" Harris nodded. The footage shows a figure approaching the car, opening the door, and getting inside. The figure matches the defendant's description. David paused, letting the answer hang. Detective, does the footage show the person's face clearly? Harris hesitated. No, the footage is grainy, and the person's face is not clearly visible. David nodded. So the footage doesn't conclusively identify me as the person entering the car. Is that correct? Harris shifted uncomfortably. That's correct, but the figure's clothing and build match your description. David turned to the judge. Your Honor, may I approach? She nodded. Proceed. David handed Harris a document. Detective, this is a still image from the security footage. Can you point out where the figure's face is clearly visible? Harris studied it, then shook his head. As I said, the face is not clearly visible. David turned to the jury. So the prosecution's key piece of evidence doesn't conclusively identify me. Isn't it possible the person in the footage is someone else? Grayson objected. Objection, Your Honor. This is speculation. The defendant is trying to mislead the jury. David responded, Your Honor, if the prosecution's evidence doesn't conclusively prove my involvement, their case is based on assumptions, not facts. The judge leaned forward, fully engaged. Overruled. Continue, Mr. Miller. David turned back to Harris. Detective, did you investigate other leads? For example, did you consider that the person in the footage might be Mr. Thompson's nephew Alex? Harris hesitated. No, we didn't. We focused on the defendant based on the initial evidence. David nodded. Thank you, Detective. No further questions. As Harris stepped down, the jury exchanged glances, the prosecution's case crumbling under David's scrutiny. The courtroom thrummed with tension, but the judge, still skeptical, leaned forward. Mr. Miller, she said sharply, you've done an impressive job so far, but let's not forget the charge of resisting arrest. Even if the grand theft auto charge is questionable, you still fled from an officer. How do you explain that? David took a deep breath. This was his moment. Your Honor, I'd like to call my next witness, Alex Thompson, the nephew of Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. Grayson shot up. Objection, Your Honor. This is highly irregular. The defense is introducing new witnesses without notice, a blatant attempt to disrupt proceedings. David remained calm. Your Honor, Alex Thompson's testimony is critical to understanding the full context of the resisting arrest charge. The prosecution has had every opportunity to investigate. If they missed key witnesses, that's not my fault. The judge narrowed her eyes, then nodded after a long pause. Overruled. Call your witness. Alex Thompson, a lanky teenager with a mop of unruly hair, took the stand, avoiding eye contact with his aunt and uncle, his hands twisting nervously. David began gently. Alex, on the night in question, did you borrow your uncle's car? Alex nodded. Yeah, I needed it for a date. And what happened after your date? Alex hesitated, glancing at Grayson's glare. I parked it near my house and left it there. When I came back later, it was gone. I thought it got towed or something. David nodded. So you didn't report it missing? Alex shook his head. No, I didn't want to get in trouble for borrowing it without asking. David turned to the jury. So the car wasn't stolen, it was borrowed by Alex, who left it unattended. When I found it, I was simply trying to return it to its rightful owner. Grayson stood, his face flushed. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The defendant still fled from an officer. David turned back to Alex. One more question, did you see anyone near the car when you left it? Alex hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, there was this guy hanging around. He looked sketchy. I didn't think much of it, but I think he might have taken it. Murmurs erupted. And did you tell the police about this man? Alex shook his head. No, I didn't think it was important. David faced the judge. Your Honor, this testimony proves the car wasn't stolen and raises doubts about the prosecution's case. As for the resisting arrest charge, I'd like to explain what happened that night. The judge leaned back, her skepticism fading. Proceed, Mr. Miller. David took a deep breath. Your Honor, when Officer Daniels approached me, he didn't identify himself. He was in plain clothes, no badge. I thought he was the sketchy man Alex mentioned, trying to rob me. That's why I ran. I wasn't resisting arrest, I was protecting myself. The courtroom fell silent, the jury exchanging glances, even Grayson momentarily speechless. The dynamics had shifted entirely. The judge leaned forward, addressing Grayson. Mr. Grayson, do you have further evidence, or do you wish to rest your case? Grayson, flustered, stood. Your Honor, the prosecution rests. However, we maintain the defendant's actions, found in a stolen vehicle, fleeing an officer, warrant a conviction, regardless of his explanations. The judge nodded, then turned to David. Mr. Miller, do you have further witnesses or evidence? David stood, unwavering. Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to call one final witness, myself. Murmurs filled the room. The judge raised an eyebrow. You wish to testify on your own behalf? David nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I believe my testimony will clarify the remaining questions. She considered, then nodded. Very well. Proceed. David took the stand, sworn in, his earlier nervousness gone. Your Honor, members of the jury, he began, his voice clear and confident, I never intended to break the law. That night, I was walking home when I noticed a car parked awkwardly, door slightly open, keys in the ignition. I thought someone might have abandoned it. I leaned in to check for the owner when I heard shouting behind me. I turned and saw a man running toward me, no uniform, no badge. I thought he was a robber, so I ran. I didn't know he was an officer until he caught and cuffed me. The jury listened intently, their skepticism giving way to curiosity. When I was arrested, I was scared and confused. I didn't understand why I was charged with grand theft auto when I hadn't stolen anything, or why I was treated like a criminal for trying to do the right thing. So I studied the law, reviewed the evidence, and prepared my defense, not just for myself, but for anyone wronged by a system that doesn't always get it right. This case is about accountability, ensuring justice works for everyone, not just those with power. I may not have a law degree, but I've proven that determination and knowledge can stand up for what's right. The courtroom fell silent, even the judge moved by his words. She spoke after a moment. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Does the prosecution have questions? Grayson stood, struggling. Mr. Miller, you claim you didn't know Officer Daniels was a police officer, but isn't it true you were avoiding getting caught? David shook his head. No, sir. I had no reason to think I was wrong. I was trying to help. If Officer Daniels had identified himself, this wouldn't have happened. Grayson sat, defeated. The judge turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the evidence and testimony. It's your duty to deliberate and reach a verdict. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning. The next day, the courtroom was packed, spectators, reporters, legal scholars, all awaiting the verdict. David sat at the defense table, hands clasped tightly, his fate in the jury's hands. The judge entered, and silence fell. Has the jury reached a verdict? She asked. The foreman, a middle-aged man with a serious expression, stood. We have, Your Honor. He unfolded the paper, clearing his throat. On the charge of grand theft auto, we find the defendant not guilty. A wave of murmurs swept through. David exhaled, unaware he'd been holding his breath. The foreman continued, on the charge of resisting arrest, we find the defendant not guilty. The courtroom erupted, cheers, gasps, disbelief. David's eyes welled, but he kept his composure. The judge banged her gavel. Order in the court. Order. When silence returned, she turned to David. Mr. Miller, you've been acquitted of all charges. You are free to go. David stood, legs trembling. Thank you, Your Honor. As he turned to leave, she stopped him. Mr. Miller, wait. He paused, meeting her softened gaze. What you did today was remarkable. You've not only defended yourself but exposed flaws in our system that need addressing. I hope you consider pursuing a career in law. We need more people like you. David nodded, a small smile breaking through. Thank you, Your Honor. I'll think about it. Outside, the sun shone brightly, the air crisp at 10:22 a.m. Central European Summer Time on this Wednesday, July 30, 2025. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions, but David walked on. David, a voice called. He turned to see Alex Thompson approaching, sheepish. I'm sorry.